My salutations to all the seekers of the Bhagavad Gita. Welcome back to the Gita Odyssey live sessions. In this series, our objective is to make the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita as close as possible to all of you who lives in this digital age, which is far removed from the original Vedic period. So far, we completed 4 lessons. And with today's session, we are going to conclude the discussion of this fundamentals and get into the Gita Dhyanam. So far, we covered the topics. What exactly is this Bhagavad Gita we are studying? And why should I study Bhagavad Gita in this age of artificial intelligence? And last week, we talked how should I study Bhagavad Gita? What should be the approach I should take for learning the Bhagavad Gita properly? And also we covered an interesting topic known as a brief history of the Bhagavad Gita. And today what we are planning to cover is 2 important topics. One is, as a sincere seeker, when I approach Bhagavad Gita, what are all the difficulties I may encounter? What are all the challenges I may encounter as a sincere seeker of the Bhagavad Gita? And how can I address that? And the second topic is, there is a lot of myths and misunderstandings about the Bhagavad Gita. So we wanted to make sure that we look into that because these myths are so popular that sometimes we think that they are reality. So we wanted to assess them on a fact-by-fact basis and make sure that they are addressed. And we cannot address all the myths or all the challenges in one session. So what we are going to do today is try to address the important ones. And as we continue through the course, we will address more such topics. So the first topic we are going to talk today is about the challenges on the path of learning the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, as we discussed earlier, it's not a simple textbook. It is a complicated textbook, yet simple to understand, being a scripture that talks about our own true nature, the nature of the absolute reality of the universe, and also the relationship between these two. It's not always easy to understand because some of the topic discussed in the Bhagavad Gita is something which is beyond the space and time, which is beyond the scope of a normal understanding. So it sometimes what is going to happen is it presents a set of unique challenges for a sincere seeker for understanding the Bhagavad Gita. Earlier we talked about merely believing in the Bhagavad Gita is not what we would like to do. Get the best out of the Bhagavad Gita. To make use of the Bhagavad Gita as a manual of life, we need to understand the Bhagavad Gita. Understanding the Bhagavad Gita, it is crucial to acknowledge and prepare for some of the challenges and difficulties in understanding this great scripture. So let's try to see what are some of the most common challenges. The first one is, the Bhagavad Gita is absolutely brilliant. And the scope of the Bhagavad Gita is very large. When such a profound material is there, it is subjected to diverse interpretation. Many different point of views can be derived from that body of knowledge. And this is true for any body of knowledge which is vast, which covers different dimensions of humanity. They are all subjected to different types of interpretation. So what is the challenge for an ordinary students like you and me? When we approach the scripture very sincerely, how do we approach the scripture? We try to listen to a few lectures. We try to take some books and try to read that. And obviously you find that sometimes when you take 2 books, apparently they contradict each other. When you hear 2 lectures, you may think that, okay, these are completely different. Please understand that these are different interpretations of the same One point we would like to highlight here is from time immemorial, Bhagavad Gita is looked through three different metaphysical point of view, popularly known as Dvaita, Vishishta Dvaita, and Advaita. There are great masters like Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, and Madhavacharya formulated these models. And the problem now for a modern student like you and me is when we try to study Bhagavad Gita, one time we may listen to a talk from an Advaita perspective, and the next talk you may hear is from a Dvaita perspective. And this Advaita and Dvaita apparently contradict. Even though they are two different points of view of the same fact, they apparently contradict. And this creates confusions and challenges among sincere students. Just to highlight this point of the difference between Dvaita, Advaita, and Vishishta Dvaita, the most traditional example given in our commentaries are wave, ocean, and water. So you can look at the ocean and you can see the ocean and the wave. What exactly is the relationship between this wave and ocean? One point of view, you can say that ocean is a child of the wave. The wave is a child of the ocean. It's for the wave, the ocean can be considered as the god because the wave was manifested because of the ocean. The wave exists because of the ocean, and the wave finally merges back to the ocean. So the relationship between the ocean and the wave is like a god and a devotee. So just like that, the Dvaita tells, we exist because of a god of the cosmos, and we are sustained because of the cause of the universe called God. And finally, we bow back to that God. So there is a separation between you, me, and the God, just like there is an apparent separation between the wave and the ocean. Now, when you go to Vishishta Dvaita tells that the wave, even though it is separate, it is part of the ocean. Yes, that is also correct. You can consider the wave as part of the ocean. So the relationship is part of a whole. So like that, the Vishishta Dvaita tell that every individual, you and me, is part of that whole divinity. That is the Vishishta Dvaita interpretation. And now the third point about the wave and the ocean is that we can always say that the essence of the wave is nothing but the water, and the essence of the ocean is also nothing but water. And the essence of the wave and the essence of the ocean are nothing but the water. So in essence, the wave and the ocean are the same. This is exactly the point of view of the Advaita. The Advaita say that the God of the cosmos, or the Bhagavan, the essence of the Bhagavan and the essence of myself is the Satchitananda Atma, and which is one and the same. So just like the 3 point, the interpretation I gave about the wave as a child of the ocean, the wave as part of the ocean, the oneness of the wave and ocean, all of them are true. Just like that, the Dvaita, Vishishta Dvaita, Advaita are 3 different point of view of the one truth. Depending upon your inclination, depending upon your liking, you can follow one of them. But the problem is, as part of a student, without understanding the metaphysical model you are following, if you try to jump onto different models and try to reconcile, it can create confusion. So please understand that this is a big challenge in the study of the Bhagavad Gita. One example is if you go and take the book of Swami Chinmayananda or Swami Dayananda, and on the side by side, you take a book of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, you think that there is apparent contradiction because one follows the Advaita model and the other follows the Dvaita model. This is a problem. So please understand that each of these commentary is valid in its own perspective. And a great scripture like Gita lends itself for multiple interpretation, and every interpretation has a valid point. So you need to understand that which type of interpretation or which type of teaching style resonates with you. And you make sure that your study of the Gita is not just a self-study. You have a teacher or a guide to guide you, because when you get a doubt, you need to make sure that that is discussed and clarified. And a community like this, it is going to help you to discuss your understanding, because don't believe anything blindly. You need to understand. So please keep in mind which commentary, which metaphysical model you are following, and stay focused. As we discussed last week, till you get familiar with one idea, please stay away from the other commentaries. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that you should follow us. What I'm saying is that you should try to focus a commentary and a master who resonates with you most. And then once you get an understanding of the whole picture, then you can go back and listen all commentaries. You can understand the different perspectives. So this is point number one. This is the first challenge in the study of the Gita. The second challenge is the complexity of the Sanskrit language. As we all know, the Gita is written, the original composition of the Gita is in Sanskrit language. And this Sanskrit language, not a commonly spoken language in the modern times. Even the Indians, as Indians, we don't speak Sanskrit, or we don't use Sanskrit for a transactional basis. So when we try to understand certain word which has a deeper dimensions and meaning in Sanskrit with a loose translation, what is going to happen is sometimes you miss the meaning. Misinterpretation can happen, and it will give a different type of understanding. I can just give you a couple of examples. One is the most common translation in English for the word Atma is soul. And please understand that the soul and the Atma has two different meanings, because the soul in English word is derived from the biblical Semitic idea, which has a complete different meaning than the Atma of the Sanskrit. So when you use the word soul to represent the Atma, which has a different dimension, which has a different meaning, it can create misunderstanding. Another word is dharma. When we use the word dharma and translate merely as religion, which we commonly do in Hindi, it can create confusion. So, and another thing in Sanskrit is it is very much context sensitive. The meaning of the word has to be derived from the context it is used. A simple example, the word Atma in Bhagavad Gita is used for referring the body, for referring the mind, and for referring the Satchidananda Atma, which is the essential nature of yourself. So without knowing the context, if you try to substitute a different meaning, it can create problem. So this is another thing you need to keep in mind. And this is another challenge a lot of people faces when you try to study the Gita. And what is the solution for this? You need to seek qualified guidance. Again, if you try to study the Gita by yourself, these are all the challenges. You need to learn from teachers who is well trained with the traditional teaching methodologies. So, and use the commentaries, the traditional commentaries such as Shankaracharya or Madhavacharya or Ramanujacharya, depending upon the metaphysical school you have associated with. Use these traditional commentaries and try to understand the insights of the word. And the third point is employ critical thinking. Don't take anything blindly. Make sure that whatever you study, it makes some connection in your head. And don't think that the Sanskrit knowledge is absolutely mandatory to study Gita. With the qualified guidance and with the use of the well-written commentaries and by critical thinking, we can learn it. So the second challenge is the challenge with respect to language. And this challenge is not just for the Gita. Every scripture has this common challenge. For example, Bible, the original language which Jesus Christ was spoken, Aramaic. The original version of the Bible is no more available. So what you have is a translated version into Greek, and almost all the English commentary of the Bible is from that Greek translation of the Bible. So if you take multiple copies of the Bible, you see sometimes contradicting commentaries. So this is a problem with all the scriptures. Luckily for Gita, what happens is the original is still there, and also the commentaries are still there. So if whenever you have doubt, you can always go back to go back to the source and revalidate that. So this is point number 2. And the point number 3 is, how do you balance the devotion and an intellectual inquiry? We already talked about the fact that Bhagavad Gita encourages you to understand rather than blindly believing. So Gita always tells, even the last statement of the Gita in the 68th verse of the 18th chapter, Krishna said, I gave you all my teaching. Now you think, and whatever that resonates you, follow it. So Gita never says, thou shalt believe, or else you are going to hell. No, that's not the methodology of the Gita. So while the Gita encourages you to use critical thinking, understanding, and logic, there is a challenge. Sometimes what happens? Too much skepticism, it can create a block in my understanding. And the other side, if you blindly believe the Gita, that also is a problem. So what is, sometimes some people approaches Gita, anything Krishna says is true. So you don't put your understanding, and sometimes you understand that differently. So that's also a problem. So what is the right method? You need to make sure that the devotion and the intellectual inquiry are balanced. You approach the Gita assuming that the teachings are true, but you wanted to validate it. So first you, just like even in the science, what do? You go with a hypothesis that this assumption is true, and you do all the experiments and validate that as a hypothesis. That's all we need. First, you think that this teaching is time tested. It is given to us by the great master Vyasa. It is practiced by several seekers and validated by several seekers. So I am assuming that this is true unless I can prove it. So then I approach Gita and try to understand Gita. And whenever I don't have an understanding, whenever I think that the dots are not connected, first suspect your understanding before concluding that this is wrong. Go to the teachers, try to understand with traditional commentaries. So that should be the approach. So if you just go with devotion alone, that's a challenge. If you go with the skepticism, that is also a challenge. So this is one challenge among a lot of students. So please keep this in mind. The next challenge is context versus content. This is a big challenge. See, the problem is the Gita is presented using a historical context. Sometimes what happens is people give a lot of importance to context and forget the actual message. I've heard people talking like, how can Krishna spend 3.5 hours in a battlefield explaining Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna? What other people were doing? Another question I always hear is, did this happen in BC 5000 or 2500? Did Krishna spoke all the words or Vyasa added? All these are irrelevant questions. What is important is the teaching, the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. A simple example. We all know that Sir Isaac Newton discovered the law of gravity, sometimes in the 16th century or early 17th century. I forgot, around that time frame. Now, suppose in the modern times you're studying gravitation. Suppose you study, okay, where did this discovery happen? Did he discover the law of gravity in England or Ireland, or a summer or a winter? Or what the type of apple fall on his head? Is that a green apple or a red apple? Or did this happen in 16th century or 1st century? Do you think that any of these discussions is going to change the law of gravity? What is more important? Most important thing here is the law of gravity. Because if you drop an object, it will come down with an acceleration of 9.8 seconds per second. That is more important rather than even the fact that Isaac Newton is discovered. It gives you a historical perspective, but it won't change. It won't make the gravity better, or it won't put gravity down if you forget that Isaac Newton discovered gravity. So Krishna, Arjuna, Mahabharata battle, all are context. Please don't get attached to context. And please don't think that the Gita is an Arjuna problem. Not at all. If it was Arjuna's problem, it would have been stopped with Arjuna. What Krishna spoken to Arjuna, to a one person, It is resonating even in 21st century. It is resonating with the scientists like Schrodinger. It resonates with a different type of personality. It can inspire Mahatma Gandhi. So what does that it mean? What is spoken to one person, it is a common message. It is a relevant message for the entire humanity. So please take the context out. The context is needed to present the message. And that same message can be presented in different context. The message of the Gita can be presented in the context of a Wall Street. The message of the Gita can be presented between a conversation between two friends in Africa. Message of the Gita can be presented in the context of a son and a daughter. The presentation of the Gita can be presented between the conversation of two homemakers. The context is a variable, but the focus on that message. This is very important. If you lose this message and if you try to give more context, why did Arjuna decided to fight? Was Arjuna more right? All these questions are irrelevant. The relevant question is how this teaching is addressing my problem. If you think Gita is a solution for Arjuna's problem, yeah, it is an intellectual gymnastics. You may enjoy the intellectual arguments, but it will not benefit you at all. So this is the fourth challenge in understanding the Gita. So you need to focus on the wisdom over the history, and you need to try to relate Gita with all aspects of your life. How can Gita help me to solve the problem at my work? How can Gita help me to have a better relationship with my spouse and children? How can Gita help me to do my work efficiently? Those should be my focus rather than Arjuna and the battlefield and everything. The next approach is the difference between academic approach as well as the spiritual journey. So why should I study physics or any other subject for that matter? I want to earn a degree. But why am I studying Bhagavad Gita? If I'm studying the Bhagavad Gita to understand Bhagavad Gita, I'm wasting my time. I'm studying Bhagavad Gita not to understand Bhagavad Gita, but I'm studying Bhagavad Gita to understand myself. So you need to go beyond an academic study. It's like a roadmap. If you sit and learn the roadmap, you might be a master of the roadmap. You will say that going to New York, you need to take this exit, you need to go this speed, this particular place, the traffic block would be there. But unless and otherwise you travel through that path, you will not have an experience of New York. You will be a erudite scholar, quoting Gita left and right, but all your problems will be your problems. So use Gita as a roadmap for our life, not as an academic study. Meaning after attending this course, if I give you a certification that you all studied Gita and you are all masters of the Gita, that won't add any value. Obviously, in universities, there are courses you may have to do that. But why we are studying Bhagavad Gita is to take it as a roadmap of life and move ahead. And then actually from philosophy, take it into a practice. Otherwise, it is useless. So you can see in this diagram, rather than a sitting and an academic study, or walk in the life empowered with the teachings of the Gita. That is what we really want. This is the next topic. So these are some of the myths or the challenges associated with Gita study. So let me pause here and ask Avanti to add any additional thoughts she has on this particular topic.
Namaskar. As always, beautifully covered all of the challenges that we face on the path. But just to reiterate some points and maybe put in some more points, let me go over the 5 sections that we've just covered very quickly. So for the first section, interpretive vastness, it's very, very important to understand our own personal belief first. Just because you are sitting in this class right now, it does not make you an you could sit for 5 6 classes and realize, no, this is not what I actually believe in. I actually believe that Krishna is a very separate god and I am a separate devotee, and that's how I want to approach Krishna. So it's very important to identify your personal understanding at this point, and trust me that understanding can change. We have seen in our own lives and the lives around us that a bhakta metamorphosing into a jnani, one path changing into another. So understand that path very properly. Once you understand what your belief is, where you are, then pick that particular line of commentary, as Rajesh has already said, and do not move from there. Because see, whichever line you pick, at some point it will make you understand the basic essence of Bhagavad Gita. Until that basic essence hits, don't move from the commentaries, don't move from masters, stick with your understanding. Once you understand that basic essence, then it is very easy to understand the commonality amongst all the interpretations. Though they seem diverse, you'll say, this is what this means, this is what this means. Because actually the Bhagavad Gita, as we read it, it caters to everybody. It caters to somebody who thinks Krishna is God, to somebody who thinks that I am a part of Krishna, and somebody who thinks that Krishna and me are one. So it caters to all three. Once you understand that essence, you will not get confused between any of the commentaries. There's this beautiful story of Hanumanji, which is there in the book, which I would really like to bring up over here again. Rama asks Hanuman, it's on page 49 if you have the book, right at the bottom. Rama asks Hanuman, who am I to you? And Hanuman replies, O Lord, as long as I identify with my body, I am your servant. When my intelligence transcends the material world and I think spiritually, I become a part of you. And when I elevate my consciousness to the spiritual plane, you and I are one and the same. So this story, when you really think, read it over and over and over again, you will be able to understand where you fit in this particular interpretive vastness that we've been talking about. Then the second one that we spoke about, Sanskrit. Okay. Now, I've been teaching Bhagavad Gita for a while, and I have had this complaint from so many people. Oh, we don't understand Sanskrit. We don't understand Sanskrit. And they all jump, not being linguists, they jump into learning Sanskrit. They become so obsessed with learning Sanskrit that that entire thing, or the gist of Bhagavad Gita is put aside. And they go mad over Sanskrit, and rest assured, even if they put heaven and earth together, they're not linguists, they're not going to get that language. So if you have a flair for language, it is a very difficult language. If you have a flair for language, it's okay to go and try and learn the language. But if you don't have the flair for language, right, Rajesh said, find a trustworthy teacher, make sure that you're understanding the subject, and let Sanskrit be at the side, and you focus on learning what the Bhagavad Gita says. In all the texts, there is a warning to this. In Ishavasya Upanishad, in Mantra 9, there is a very strong statement, which one of the interpretations is also about being caught up in the language itself, where he says, those who worship avidya, ignorance, enter into blinding darkness. But those who revel in vidya, knowledge, they enter into greater darkness. So this reveling, because Sanskrit is a language that you can revel in, and it's a tick mark, right? Oh my God, I can speak Sanskrit. So be careful of that. In Bhaja Govindam, the very chorus is, Nahi Nahi Rakshati Dukrin Karne. Right at the start, the whole story, if you understand how Bhaja Govindam came about, Shankara was watching and he saw somebody obsessing over the grammatical, beauty of Sanskrit and getting obsessed with that. And he said, stop doing this. Have you understood? Bhaja Govindam, that is the essence of the whole human experience. What are you getting caught up in? When you are about to die, this is not going to help you. When you are about to leave this body, this is not going to help you. And also in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, as we will study when we get there, 42, Krishna again warns, don't get caught up in the flowery speech, which also very much implies the Sanskrit language. So I'm just encouraging those who know Sanskrit and all, fantastic, it's good. But as long as you have a good teacher, don't get obsessed with the language and don't let the language stop you. Number 3, the amalgamation of the intellect and the mind. It's very, very important for that. We are talking about not letting just the book itself get, have us carried away. But I would even say nowadays the teachers that teach you, don't get carried away by the teachers. Just because you have a soft corner for the teacher or you like the teacher, Krishna himself says, Pranipatena prashnena, get up and ask your questions. So what the heart feels, the devotion, it has to be tempered by intellectual understanding. And what your intellect understands has to be ignited by bhakti. I'll give you a very simple example and maybe this will make it clearer. If there's a very hard piece of wood that you have to cut, you have a saw, right? You have a saw in your hand and you try and cut that wood. It's hard to cut that wood. Now think of the intellect as the saw that is finding it hard to cut that wood. What does a carpenter do if you've ever watched that? Slowly pour oil onto that onto the axe that you're using. As soon as you start dripping oil, it becomes easier to cut the wood. So what is what in this analogy? The wood is understanding of the scriptures, the axe is your intellect, and that oil that you pour is devotion. So axe and oil, devotion and intellect has to come together to understand this. So at all point, make sure that both of them are walking together. There's a very famous English saying which says, follow your heart, but wait, make sure you take your head along with you. So yes, you can run with your heart, but make your head always follow you. Context versus content was covered beautifully, but I would like to say, alert you all to one thing. Most people, when they start studying the Gita, you begin to see Arjuna and everybody else except yourself. And you begin to see Krishna in yourself. So most of my classes, I have people coming and discussing, this one is doing that and that one is doing that. And my mother-in-law, it's exactly like this. Bhagavad Gita's context is not about anybody else. We are not using this as a mirror to show other people. We have to turn it and use the mirror to see ourselves. Arjuna is us, we ourselves. How can we change ourselves? So just be mindful of that all that you learn over here has to be totally guiding your progress and not making you point fingers at others. And the last point, academic approach versus spiritual journey. When you talk about the intellect, there's two intellects. Tikshna Buddhi and Sukshma Buddhi. Now, Tikshna Buddhi, as Rajesh ji said, would address subjects like physics, math, chemistry. It is with all the things terrestrial. It deals with all things terrestrial. And that, depending on how intelligent you are, you can really master it and you can do very well. You can become a physicist, you can become a mathematician, you can become all of these things. But to understand the spiritual realms and to understand the scriptures, you of the Sukshma Buddhi, which is the subtle intellect. So do not approach this subject while you need the Tikshna Buddhi to understand the language. And the second part of what we studied in our last class has to be done with the Sukshma Buddhi. Let your subtle intellect come into the picture, drop all these very terrestrial things that you get caught up in and start focusing, understanding on what is the essence behind the words. So when you do it like this, it won't become an academic study for you because you'll start internalizing it much faster. I think that covers all of the points that we've just gone through.
Thank you, Avanti. That's very, very, very good complimentary discussion. So let's go to the final topic, busting the myths. Some of these myths or misunderstanding comes from lack of knowledge, or also due to the challenge we talked earlier, due to the wrong translation, misunderstanding the context. So genuinely lack of knowledge is the cause of a lot of this misinterpretation. And apart from that, there are intentional misinterpretations also, just to put this down. So it's very important that we seek authentic understanding of the Gita. Sometimes what you hear about Gita may not be correct. You have to verify that by yourself. So go beyond the surface level interpretation and try to understand it properly. So in this session, we will quickly go over the 10 myths that are very common. And that doesn't mean that all the myths are over here. As we continue these sessions, we will try to understand. The first one is the Bhagavad Gita is a religious text only for Hindus. This is completely wrong. Yes, it's a fact that Hinduism or the Sanatana Dharma generated or composed the Bhagavad Gita. But that doesn't mean that the applicability of the Gita or the usage of the Gita is not just limited to Hindus, right? We know that like artificial intelligence would have been discovered in America. That doesn't mean that only in America the use of artificial intelligence is there. It is there every part of the world. The computer was invented in America. That doesn't mean that the other parts of the world it is not useful. So like that, if there is a teaching that is going to help humanity everywhere, irrespective of the nationality, professional status, caste, creed, or anything, that is what is Bhagavad Gita. Essentially, it is a manual of life which is going to help you to lead an effective and efficient life. Who do not want it? Right? At least the first part of the Gita, which is going to talk about a stable mind, a focused mind, a controlled mind. So that teaching is applicable to even to the corporate world, and that is why you see Gita is being adopted by the corporates. So this is, even though it has its origin in Hinduism, the applicability of the Gita is not just limited to Hinduism. It is an asset of the entire humanity. And one more thing you need to notify in the Bhagavad Gita is never ever in the Bhagavad Gita it excludes anybody. The inclusivity is complete. And one of the pronoun used in Bhagavad Gita is yaham. In Sanskrit, if you use the word yaham, it's a universal pronoun. Nobody is excluded. Everybody is included. So it is a completely inclusive scripture. If you hear otherwise, understand that that is a myth. Please understand, it doesn't profess a particular mode of worship. It doesn't that if you believe in Krishna or else you are going to hell. It never tells that this is the only one way. But never ever. On the other hand, he says, Krishna tells, whosoever comes to me in whatsoever form. So if you worship God as Father in heaven, it is completely acceptable. If you worship God as Allah, it is completely acceptable. It doesn't matter as long as you have that inclusivity. And this is the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita. So it's not a religious textbook for Hindus only. The second myth, which says that it's a war-mongering textbook and it propagates war and violence. And you might be knowing the story, right? In Russia, there was a complaint filed and the court, without understanding, banned the Bhagavad Gita for some time. Obviously, we were able to clear it, but this happened. Why? Because the context of the Bhagavad Gita is a war. That doesn't mean that Bhagavad Gita is promoting the war. Bhagavad Gita is not advising to wage a war. The war implied in the Bhagavad Gita, it's a battle of life. Each and everyone has to take. So saying that Bhagavad Gita encourages war, it is wrong. On the other hand, on the chapter 16 and chapter 17, you see a lot of beautiful interpretations of what is ahimsa. Ahimsa is taken into a different dimension. Ahimsa at the speech level, ahimsa at the body level, ahimsa at the mental level. That type of details are given. So Bhagavad Gita, in fact, it encourages you to follow the ahimsa. And the war is justified only when there is no other means, right? If you do, for example, if this great country of America, if we didn't engage in the Second World War, what would have been the condition of the world? So if you don't engage in an act of war, that is going to cause more damage than engaging the war. That is the only time the war is justified. This is a book of ahimsa. And mind you, the greatest proponent of ahimsa or non-violence in the modern world is Mahatma Gandhi. And he himself publicly acknowledged that everything he learned as part of ahimsa came from the Bhagavad Gita. So please don't think that Bhagavad Gita is a war-mongering textbook. It never promotes the war. The war is only in the context, because if this teaching is applicable to the most difficult circumstances of life, then it can be extended to any circumstances. So war is only a context. Bhagavad Gita doesn't propagate war. So if somebody tells that this scripture propagates war, they didn't understand the scripture. That's all. The third myth around Bhagavad Gita is that it is a complex philosophical book. ordinary people cannot understand. It is theory. It cannot be lived practically, which is completely wrong, because Bhagavad Gita offers step by step practices for you to live your life. A simple example, all of you are inspired by the modern wellness theory. The sixth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita tells, Yukta Hara Viharasya, Yukta Cheshtasya Karmasu, Yukta Sopnavabodhasya Yogo Bhavati Dukkha. So, what is the ideal lifestyle of a human being? Appropriate food, the quality and the quantity. Not too much, not too less. Yukta Cheshta, your entertainment, should be appropriate, not too much, not too less. Your activity level should be not too much, not too less. Your sleep should be not too much, not too less. This is the practice. It talks about karma yoga in a very by step manner. It helps you how you can practice something here and now, and how you can get that results here and now, not as a post-mortem reward. A lot of scriptures tells you, you follow XYZ, what exactly you get as the benefit. You get only that at the end of your life. You have to die. These are non-verifiable belief. So Bhagavad Gita is not like that. It tells you to approach life in a very systematic way, and nothing is impractical there. So everything is practical. So this is another popular myth. The fourth myth is Bhagavad Gita advocates renunciation of worldly life. So whenever all of us might have had this experience, Swami Chinmayananda used to say, a lot of people think that this is either for retired people or retarded people. Bhagavad Gita. And a lot of people think that if you study Bhagavad Gita at a young age, they become completely indifferent to the world. Reality check is what? The Bhagavad Gita itself is happening in a battlefield. It is not a conversation between two monks, just like Upanishads. It is a complex conversation between two family men, two worldly men. Krishna was a family man. He was engaged in the world completely. So was Arjuna. So it was a teaching given by a person who is engaged in the world to a person who is living in the world. So this is very important. In chapter 3, Krishna highlights this point. Chapter 3, 4, again he clarifies. You don't need to run away from the world. You just need to engage in your activity. In chapter 3, Arjuna wanted to go and take sannyasa. Krishna said, no, that is not what your makeup is. You need to engage in the world, yet you can be spiritual. You need to engage in all your activity, and you can be spiritual. So it brings spirituality into our daily life. You don't need to run away to a different place, in a different settings, in a different way of life to become spiritual. Spirituality is brought into your day-to-day activities, your studying, your day-to-day work, your family matters, everything becomes spiritual. So this is what it helps us to convert our ordinary actions into spiritual. So please don't worry. By studying Gita, you will not run away from the world. You will better engage with the world. So this is the fourth myth about Bhagavad Gita. The fifth myth about Bhagavad Gita is, this is mainly for ascetics and spiritual seekers, right? And also the fifth myth is for the title is wrong. The fifth myth is it promotes fatalism and through the law of karma. That is what it means. Bhagavad Gita promotes fatalism. So everything is predetermined. So you don't have any option and you're bound by karma. That is a complete misunderstanding of the karma. The karma never tells you that your karma is never fatalistic. Karma makes you more responsible. It tells you that you are the owners of your action and you have the ability to make your future. Your actions is going to determine your next set of courses of life. So karma, understanding law of karma, misunderstanding law of karma, it's a popular myth. So Bhagavad Gita is not promoting fatalism. It makes you responsible. You are responsible for your actions and you are responsible for making your future. So this is what the myth about Bhagavad Gita. It is not a fatalistic book. The next one is, as we said, it is exclusively for ascetics and spiritual seekers. It is needed only for the sannyasins and also the monks in orange robe. No, as we explained earlier, it is a guide for the entire humanity. It includes housewives, it includes professionals, it includes every part of the society. Gita can help them. Gita can help them to become better in their actions, like yoga, karmasu kaushalam. It can help them to take control over the mind, samatvam yoga muchyate. It can help them to lead a healthy, happy, efficient, contented life. It can help you to relate with other human beings. So Bhagavad Gita is not exclusively for ascetics. As we said earlier, Krishna was not an ascetic, Arjuna was not an ascetic. None of us in this particular group, we are not ascetics. We are pretty much, we have all the challenges as each one of you have. We have a job, we have a family, everything is there. And we all find Bhagavad Gita is very useful. This is householder's path. Bhagavad Gita particularly calls out the path of householders in chapter 4 and chapter 5 and highlight that it is meant for the entire humanity. This is very important to understand. So a lot of people think that, okay, this is for sannyasis or the people in orange robe, and it is not applicable to me. It is more applicable to you rather than a person in the orange robe. Myth 7. This is again a lot of problem. Bhagavad Gita promotes casteism or Brahmanical supremacy. Yes, casteism or the Brahmanical supremacy was a problem. I'm not denying it. Some people misused it, some people abused it, but not with a scriptural sanction. Bhagavad Gita never support any form of discrimination. The reason why this criticism happens is obviously a lot of people wanted to misinterpret this. And there is one verse in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4. It tells, Chatur Varnyam Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasha. Such people conveniently quote that first line, which is the Chatur Varnyam Maya Srishtam. They say that Krishna created the caste system. No, first of all, caste system and Varna systems are completely different. Second thing is, what exactly is the clarification Krishna tells? Guna Karma Vibhagasha. He never said that one is superior to the other. He included everyone, and this classification is only to prescribe appropriate spiritual practices. This is very important. Gita or the Advaita Vedanta believes in the divinity of the entire human being, and it tells that very place. In Bhagavad Gita, there is a beautiful verse. It tells Pandita Samadarshina. Pandita, the person who knows the truth. Pandita means, Panda means Atma. Pandita means the one who knows the Atma or the truth. That person sees a Brahman and a Chandala, an elephant and a cow, and a dog and a dog eater with the same eye. He is going to see divinity in everything. There is absolutely no discrimination. So this is very important to understand that. Bhagavad Gita doesn't promote casteism or Brahmanical supremacy. Bhagavad Gita helps everybody to become that highest spiritual potential. It doesn't matter. Imagine Krishna and Vyasa, the two great teachers of the Bhagavad Gita. If you really think about per the modern day classification, both of them would be falling into a schedule, meaning OBC or a scheduled caste. Vyasa was a son of a fisherwoman, and Krishna was a Yadava. And we all know every master, like Vatmiki. Who is Vatmiki? He was a tribal person. He is the one who wrote Ramayana. So Gita or any of our scriptures doesn't promote casteism or Brahmanical supremacy. I know that some people practiced it, and I know that this ulcer or cancer is there in some people's mind. That doesn't mean that the scripture supports this. So please understand that. This is very important. On the other hand, there are several shlokas in the Bhagavad Gita which tells the unity of everybody, which tells the equality among everybody. So this is very important. You may hear a lot of people with vested interest try to promote it to put Gita down. As serious students of the Gita, you yourself have to verify. Whenever people say Chatur Varnyam Maya Srishtam, ask them to quote the next sentence. Then itself it will fall flat. This is very important. I wanted to tell you that one of the greatest commentary I read is from the lineage of Srinarayana Guru, who came from a lower background and established so many temples. And also his lineage, Nataraja Guru and Guru Nitya Chaitanya Yati, they created one of the best commentaries of the Gita. So this is very important. It is not for Brahmins, by meaning when I say Brahmins, the Brahman by birth. Nobody becomes Brahman by birth. That's all different matter of discussion. So Bhagavad Gita doesn't promote casteism. The next myth is it is a post-retirement spiritual exercise. A lot of people think that, okay, now I'm engaged in life. I will take this Gita only after my retirement. It's like, think about that. You are given a GPS system and you are going for a long drive. Let's say that only you are picking up that GPS in your last leg of your life. What is the value? You could have optimized your trip completely. You could have had a better experience of your life if you had used that GPS from the beginning of your life. So this is not a scripture which is meaning post-retirement. It is required right and now. This is very important. Myth 9. So some people think that the Bhagavad Gita teaching contradicts with the Upanishads teaching. This is wrong. Because the Gita Dhyanam itself always meaning tells that, as Swami Dayananda always used to say, if you don't understand, if you think that there is wrong, you first suspect your understanding. Because Bhagavad Gita is nothing but the teachings of the Upanishad in a more distilled form, in a more relatable form. So it is the summary of the entire Upanishad. Bhagavad Gita does could see verbatim the some of the verses exactly. For example, some verses of the Katha Upanishad, you can see exactly like that in Bhagavad. They are not contradictory. I don't know how people can spread these type of myths. And the last one is, some people say that possessing the Gita or Mahabharata in the home leads to family dispute. Because a lot of people think that Mahabharata is a story of war. And if you read the Mahabharata, for that matter, Bhagavad Gita, which is part of the Mahabharata daily, it creates family disputes. This is completely a superstition. Bhagavad Gita, in fact, it is going to make your relationship better. The material world certainly contains conflict, just like Mahabharata. Bhagavad Gita is not a contribution for that. In fact, Bhagavad Gita is going to help to address that conflicts. So please understand that studying Mahabharata, it is going to help me to understand how the human ego works, how it is going to create conflicts, how it prompts people to act against dharma. Bhagavad Gita it's a guide, it's a guiding light, which helps you to find resolution in all these conflicts. These are the different 10 myths we wanted to cover. And one of the quote also I wanted to talk, embrace the teachings of the Gita with an open heart and a discerning mind. This is what we wanted to highlight today. You need to approach this teaching with an open heart and a discerning mind. Then what is going to happen? The true understanding is going to happen. So let me pause and request Avanti to add any additional comments on these myths.
Thank you and namaskar again. So quickly over the myths, maybe two points, throw them in over there. It is a text only for Hindus. I have lived abroad for the last 25 years. I've been out of India and in 3 different continents. I was in the US for 10 years. I was in Melbourne, Australia for 5 years, and I've been over here now for 10 years. Singapore. I live in Singapore now. And I cannot tell you the amount of parenting workshops in international schools, management workshops in various clubs, stress and anger management workshops in, I can't tell you how many different contexts I have attended, where verbatim shlokas and shlokas of Bhagavad Gita have been picked up and given, obviously in English, so you don't know it's from the Bhagavad Gita, but when you study the Bhagavad Gita, you'll understand all of the philosophy comes from there. So it is not, and it is given to everybody. They don't come and say, are you Hindu? Will you understand this? And everybody understands it very, very well. Even for children, the workshops that we have for children, we use the Bhagavad Gita in international schools. So it is not only for Hindus, the context is universal at all times. Warmongering textbook, you must have heard this question a million times. Why do good people suffer? Good people don't suffer. stupid, excuse the word, stupid people suffer. And that stupidness is actually distilled and explained as passive goodness, where we do not use our goodness as a collective good. And that's why we lay down as doormats or we lay down as worms and we get crushed over. So the Bhagavad Gita teaches goodness, innate goodness, to use the buddhi, to use the intellect for the betterment of the whole. And in that, if war or if confrontation is required, then that is the way that we have to go. So it is not a warmongering textbook. It just teaches you to pick up the sword when you really do have to. For a long time, our DNA has been conditioned that you show one face, somebody slaps you on one cheek, you show the other cheek. I'm sorry, that doesn't work. And I'm sure all of you have experienced that in your own life. Philosophical textbook, proof is in the pudding. Now, this will continue to be a philosophical textbook in your life if you just attend the class once a week and that's it. It will be great philosophy that you hear and you can quote over coffee mornings and lunches or give lectures to your family. But the beauty of this textbook is the minute you start internalizing this, the minute you start applying it aggressively, applying it in your life, it will turn from philosophy to absolute practicality. So that application is key, and that is in your hand, whether to keep this as a philosophical textbook or to actually use it in some practical sense. Renunciation of action was myth number 4. Action is the very insignia of life. Whether you want to act or whether you don't want to act, even to stay alive, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita later on, you have to act to keep your body alive. You have to get out of bed, you have to feed it, you have to do 100 things. So Bhagavad Gita can never ever preach renunciation of action, because action is the very source of life. Bhagavad Gita teaches how to act, and mostly it teaches renunciation in action, not renunciation of action. What it teaches us to drop the kartritva, which is the doership, I, and the bhoktritva. What will I get out of this? Once you drop these two things, all the karma and all that associated things that comes to trouble us drops, and that is where you start leading a very fulfilling life. So it does not teach us renunciation of action. It teaches us renunciation of this doership and this running after enjoying within the action. So renunciation in action. Is it fatalistic? In fact, there was a question that came up about this fatalistic thing. Yes, the question, what you said in the question, I forget who asked. It's true that whatever we face today is the sum total of what we have done before this moment. Even this class that you're sitting in right now, it is a result of many things that have happened in the past that have brought you to this moment. This moment, as you are experiencing it, cannot be changed. It is the sum total. So in that way, this particular moment is predestined by your own actions. But what is the definition of future? The definition of future is the past, all of the past, modified with wisdom in the present or not. So if you have the knowledge of something like the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedanta or Upanishads, then you will have the wisdom to meet this particular moment that you yourself have brought into your life in a way that you will have a very different effect in the future. So when you see that you have the control in this moment to change what has appeared before you, then you realize it's not fatalistic. You are empowered just with that thought that you can change the whole thing. It's like somebody saying, oh, diabetes, it's genetic in my family. Okay? You can sit with that. I've got diabetes. Okay, so I don't care. I'll eat sweet. I'll do this. I'll take insulin. I'll take this. But today research has shown that it is not necessarily entirely genetic. If today you start taking preventative steps and you start managing your diet, your exercise, not every diabetic family would have every single person in the family diabetic as well. So this is being proven even by science, where it's completely debunking this whole thing about genetics playing the ultimate fatalistic role in our life. So it is not fatalistic. Yes, what we meet is the product of our past, but how we meet it will define our future, and there is where lies our power. Then ascetics or spiritual seekers, you have to keep drilling this in your head. Bhagavad Gita is meant for us. It is meant for us simply because one Grahastha, Krishna, is giving this knowledge to another Grahastha, Arjuna, in the heat of the battlefield. And every moment of our life we are faced with a battle. Har kadam, there is one something or the other that we have to meet, we have to overcome every step of our way, of our life, whether it is externally or internally. So it is definitely not only for ascetics or spiritual seekers. It eventually makes us, it is a moksha sadhya. Eventually it brings us to that. Once it teaches us how to live our battlefields properly, it brings us to that point of becoming ascetic and becoming spiritual seekers. But it's very much for us. Casteism, when you understand that, when you understand through the Bhagavad Gita, when it's taught properly, you will understand the beauty of the caste system. And like Rajesh ji touched upon it, that it is just a classification of mental temperaments to be able to choose our right paths in the world and our spiritual paths. What goes down as career counseling right now, in all the, before we go to colleges, college counseling, school counseling, career counseling, what is that? It's just mapping our, our general mental temperament and telling us, you'll be good at this, you won't be good at that, stay away from that. In fact, when my daughter has now started understanding the Bhagavad Gita, and she's only 19 years old, she's saying, she's completely American. She was born in America. She's been brought up in the American school. She says, Mummy, I think I really, really believe in the arranged marriages, because you actually start mapping things that how you can get along, how two people can get along, what is common between them. So a deep understanding of the Bhagavad Gita taught by a proper teacher will make you understand the reason of this classification, the beauty of it, and how wonderfully it helped then. And if we adopt it rightly now, how wonderfully it will help us now. Not to abuse one another, but to stick to our paths. Post-retirement, Bhagavad Gita came into my life when I was 25, and till today I'm kicking myself that it did not come earlier, because 0 to 25, I had such a traumatic life. And if I had had the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita, I don't think I would have cried that much. I don't think I would have beaten myself that much. I don't think I would have made many, many wrong decisions that I made. So at 25, if I could feel that it's come too late, way too late, I can't see anybody saying this should be post-retirement. It will be of no use. And even then, it's not of any use, because whatever age you take it up, as Krishna promises in the Bhagavad Gita, it will continue in your next life. Whatever knowledge you are able to assimilate now, it will continue in your later lives, whatever reincarnations you get into. But rest assured, whatever age you are, don't put it off a minute longer. Take it up now, sit with it, and make that a part of your daily routine. Upanishads, I heard Sarvapriyananda ji saying very beautifully the other day. I was listening to one of his talks where he said Upanishads have this typical way of when you read the Upanishads, they start with the highest truth and then they mellow down. Like their first statement will be Tattvam, and then obviously nobody understands. Then they mellow it down with stories and with analogies and all of that, and then they come down to simpler concepts. Similarly, if you say that Bhagavad Gita opposes the Upanishads, first of all, a lot of Upanishads verbatim are in the Bhagavad Gita. Even the style of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2 begins with the highest philosophies. And those philosophies are being told to Arjuna, who is in a completely messed up headspace to be able to take any of it. But Krishna starts with that. The wise don't grieve of what is coming and what is going. Imagine that. So it is not a contradiction. It follows the Upanishadic style also, and it really, really distills the Upanishads very beautifully to be able to put it in practical use immediately in our lives. And the last myth is that this thing about having Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata in your house. If you study the Bhagavad Gita, the most beautiful thing that happens in life is you change. And if you change, I can write this in blood out for you. Everything around you changes. That is one of Mahatma Gandhi's most famous quotes. Be the change you want to see. The wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita changes you in such dramatic ways that even in a household that is brimming with conflict, that one matchstick that you become, that one flame of light that you become in that house, everything starts shifting. So forget about whether Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita is going to cause any conflicts in your house. Rest assured that with the dramatic changes you see only after the applications of the teachings, everything around you will change and there will be no gunzaish, as we say in Hindi. There will be no chance only of conflict. So forget about it that it will cause any conflicts. That's all.